This is crime scene investigator Chris G, leading you under the police tape and into a crime scene. Join me as we discuss the ever-changing world of forensic science. Put on your PPE, ready your fingerprint brushes, and experience the drama of a crime scene. Hello everyone, and welcome to my podcast, The Crime Scene Investigator. My name is Chris G, and it's really good to have you on board. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm just about to hit the milestone of 10,000 downloads, which is massive. I never thought in a million years that so many people would download this show. It was just basically me having a little ramble about what I do, and maybe some people will find it interesting, particularly those that are, say, getting into the field, say at university, or just people that are generally curious about it. But I never thought that I'd get 10,000 people downloading my podcast, or 10,000 downloads. It might just be my mum, for all I know, downloading this 10,000 times. So if you're listening, Mum, thank you. You're helping with my statistics, or just knocking them all out of track. Anyway, today I'm going to talk about Bloodstain Pattern Analysis. It's a subject of mine that I absolutely love. I studied it whilst I was doing some training to become a crime scene investigator, and it just really piqued my interest. I think it's because it's so visual, and there's so much knowledge you can gain from just something that you can just quite simply see in front of you, and it just fascinated me, and I just ended up studying it ever since. I've been lucky enough to go over to the Netherlands Forensic Institute and do some learning with them and their team over there. They've got a fantastic setup, the Netherlands, and I was just in awe of how they treat their crime scenes, and the kind of, the setup that they've got there is just absolutely unbelievable. And then I've done some training over here in the UK, and that's with a company called Spattered, and that was with Joe Millington and Gillian Leake. Both Joe and Gillian are just out of this world when it comes to their knowledge. They just they are just fantastic experts that we've got over here in the UK. Some really great cases that both of them have worked on, and they've really helped progress some pretty horrific crime scenes in court, and led to the right convictions. So well done to them both, and thank you for training me those years ago. So I thought I'd maybe start with a little topic, a little discussion about what is bloodstain pattern analysis. Some of you may have an idea or an opinion about bloodstain pattern analysis that you may have gained from TV shows such as Dexter, Silent Witness, CSI. Other people may not know what bloodstain pattern analysis is. So basically, in a nutshell, bloodstain pattern analysis is the study of distribution, size or shape of the bloodstains that have been deposited on a surface within a crime scene or on a person, and it's the study of those to determine the events that have led to the blood being shed. So how has that blood been deposited on that surface? What are the events that have been caused to lead to that? And could that information, once gained, be beneficial in a courtroom? So say, for example, if you've got a suspect that is saying that something occurred this way, you may analyse the bloodstains at the scene and think, well, there's no way that could have happened because this is what I'm seeing and this is how I'm interpreting the bloodstains. BPA, bloodstain pattern analysis for short, I'll refer to it as BPA from now on, basically can be subjective. So one person can think one thing and then another expert can think something else. What you have to make sure you do as an expert is make sure you consider various arguments before you give off your opinion. It's not quite simply, like this is someone's fingerprint, this is someone's DNA, although DNA isn't always 100%, and I think there's probably cases as well where fingerprints aren't always completely reliable. As you've probably seen, there's a couple of cases in the news historically that has led to that. I've just contradicted myself. This is what happens when you have a podcast with only one person. You end up arguing with yourself. But yeah, it can be BPA, when used right, it can be a fantastic tool for a courtroom. So that is my opinion of what BPA is. Common misconceptions about bloodstain pattern analysis do tend to occur, and this can be through TV shows. One common misconception, and if ever I'm to give evidence on bloodstain pattern analysis, what I need to do for the jury is demonstrate how blood behaves. If you, and I recommend you do this, not when you're driving. If you listen to this while you're driving, please don't do this. But what I recommend you do is grab your phone, type in the word blood, and see what emoji comes up. I've just done it, and there's a little tear-shaped emoji that's red that appears. Now this tear shape is quite misleading, because when blood is travelling through the air, it forms a spherical shape, not a teardrop shape. And I think what a lot of people feel or think is that when blood, say, drips, it forms this teardrop shape, and it retains that shape when it's in mid-flight. And basically this just doesn't happen. The blood, once it breaks away from what it's dripping from, it will form that spherical shape, and it will travel through the air in that sphere. So when it's deposited onto a surface, the shape that you then see, if it's not a sphere shape, then it means that it has been altered in some way because of how it's come into contact with that surface. For example, and this is really hard because this is a podcast and you don't have, I don't have any visual aids, it's really tricky. It's like me teaching you BPA whilst blindfolded. It's really tricky. But for example, if you get a blood stain that falls to the floor, there's no sort of motion or anything like that you've made. You've just got, say, a blood that's dripping off the end of your finger, and then it falls to the floor. The floor is completely flat, so it's struck the floor at a 90-degree angle. You're probably going to get a nice circular shape, a blood drop. Everyone's seen this kind of stain. Yeah, it's just a nice round stain. However, same scenario, blood dripping from your finger, it's travelling down, and your surface is at a 45-degree angle. Then that blood stain is going to react very differently. It's going to kind of what we call look elliptical, so like an oval shape, and it won't be completely round. It will still have round features to it, but it won't be that complete spherical shape that you would have if it struck it at 90 degrees. So why is this important? Well, it's important because when a bloodstain strikes a surface, if it's not completely spherical, then you know that bloodstain hasn't struck it at a 90-degree angle. Perhaps it has travelled through the air and it's gone upwards onto a surface, and then you'd be able to tell by the shape of that stain. It may be that the blood has gone up, and then it's reached its maximum velocity, and then gravity's taken hold, and now the blood stain's travelling down, and as it's travelling down it's struck a surface. So it could be that you've got the same event that has occurred, that blood to be airborne, but yet you might have some stains that are at their maximum velocity when they're striking a surface, some other stains from this bloodshed event which are now becoming gravity induced, so gravity's pulling down these stains. So you could have two blood stains from the same event that are hitting it at different angles. And this is why, I'm sorry I'm going to ruin Dexter in this podcast for you, but this is why when you're doing that stringing that you see on telly, where you take a load of string, you measure up the blood stains and the angles that they've hit, you may have some that just are way off and go not into that area of origin that you're looking for. Whenever I've watched Dexter, all his blood stains that he interprets from like a wall or something like that, they all end up in that same area of origin back to, I think he uses a stick or something like that, I've seen him use. It all ends up to this, and you think there may be some stains which don't do that because they're not a true kind of representation of that blood stain in general. And with the stringing technique, this is done by Pythagoras' theorem. Now this has probably triggered a few memories for you, because you would have remembered, you may not remember, you may, depends how interesting your maths teacher was, but you may remember Pythagoras' theorem from school. Now for those of you that are it's a bit cloudy as to what Pythagoras' theorem is, do you remember you've got those triangles? You've got a triangle that's at a 90 degree, one of the angles is at 90 degrees, and you've got to work out the other angles, and you'll have, is it the sine, cosine and tan? You've got those special kind of scientific calculators that you work out these on. If you bring up your phone, and I've done this various times, I've got an iPhone, so I'll bring up my calculator. I've just got that standard calculator with the numbers and that. If you turn your calculator sideways, it becomes a scientific calculator. And then you've got the sine, cosine and tangent, as well as all the numbers. And we would use an equation to work out the angle at which a bloodstain has struck a surface. And then once we know that angle, we can then draw some string from the stain to a fixed point, which then becomes your area of origin. So where you've got all these angles, all these bits of string, they should, if you've done it correctly, form one point where the string intersects one another, and that's where your bloodshed event occurred from. We don't really do this at crime scenes all that much, and I've never seen it done other than in a training room or on television, because it takes so long to do. Each bloodstain that you're then going to do this for, it can be hours upon hours of processes, especially if you've got multiple sort of bloodstains that are from different events. And you could probably guess the area of origin roughly. It's not going to progress your case all that much, unless I think you've got an argument over, say, self-defense, whether or not someone was, say, stood up or they were sort of crouched down. If we knew this when we were going in, then maybe it would become crucial. So those are the common misconceptions of BPA. So what patterns of bloodstains will I see at a crime scene? Now we've got, I'd say, three main categories, so three main headings of patterns, and then as you dive further into these headings, we can kind of split them up into sort of individual characteristics of BPA. Your main kind of headings that you've got are spatter patterns. So these are patterns that have been airborne due to force. So that force could be quite simply me flicking blood off my hand, or it could be someone, say, punching someone that's covered in blood. It could be someone that strikes someone with a weapon, or the blood flicking off a weapon. So these kind of stains that we see, we would classify under the spatter category, not splattered. We don't use the word splatter. That is something that you do when you miss the toilet bowl. So spatter is what we refer to. Passive are stains that have travelled through the air through no means of force. So these are just, say, gravity induced. And passive, not just through the air, but it could be that you'll get a pool of blood that is just kind of ejecting out of someone. Or it could be that, there's already blood on a surface and it's flowed down due to gravity. Passive are basically where there's been no force to the blood ejecting from that person or being distributed onto that surface. No force, say, other than gravity. And then you've got transfer stains. So transfer stains, these are quite easy to visualize. You've got blood on your hands, you leave it on a surface, that's a transfer stain. It could also be that there's already blood on a surface and you swipe your hand through it. That again would be a transfer stain. Transfer stains are basically stains where a blood-bearing surface has come into contact with a surface, or a surface, vice versa, a surface has come into contact with a blood-bearing surface. Transfer patterns and sort of spatter passive patterns tend to look a bit different. So transfer will be quite different because they won't all the time necessarily be spherical. I don't think I've ever seen a spherical transfer pattern. They are kind of like chaotic sometimes. If you've got like rushed movement within a scene, it may be that you've got hair swipes where like long hair might be bloodied. These would kind of be your common transfer patterns that you would see, and like I said, they wouldn't be spherical. So that's how you can determine them from your other stains. So if we take the spatter category and break it down, you've got stains like impact patterns. Impact patterns tend to form that V shape where they go up and out. A good way for me to get you to visualize this is if you splash in a puddle, the water goes up and outwards. You'll probably notice this now when you splash in puddles. So if I was to stamp in blood, the similar sort of thing would happen. The blood would go up and outwards in that kind of V-shaped pattern. So when you do see these at crime scenes, you can kind of look and see that this is an impact pattern. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone has struck your victim, and that's kind of what I would always say to sort of the more inexperienced CSIs, is that you associate the word impact with that striking action, someone punching, someone hitting someone with a baseball bat or something like that, when actually it could be just someone stepping in blood. When I was watching the Netflix show The Staircase, I think the BPA expert was talking about all these bloodstains that were up the staircase wall and everything, and I was just thinking, well, this could simply happen by someone just stepping in blood. It could be an impact pattern, yes, it could be someone striking someone, but it could also be this. And this is where you need to go back to that mindset of you need to have that argument with yourself as to what else could it be. Expirated patterns, which are what we refer to when someone's got blood in their mouth and spits it out. It could be that someone's got a nosebleed and it's going through their airway, it's kind of coming into their mouth, or it's coming up through their lungs, and they need to spit and eject it out. This gives a very similar pattern to say impact patterns. You'll get that V shape, but there may be some differences in that pattern, such as air bubbles where it's mixed with mucus, and these air bubbles will be very small but present within those bloodstains that have been distributed onto your surface. Or it may be that where I hope you're not eating your dinner, by the way, but it may be where the blood mixes with mucus that it can't break up, and that's when you get, say, two stains that are stuck together with what we call stringing, and it's where this mucus has just made the blood more viscous, more thick, and they can't break apart. So it's kind of these little minute details that will separate an impact pattern from an expirated pattern. Another pattern that falls under the spattered category is cast off, and again, what I say to people is if you see a cast off pattern, don't think that cast off pattern has come off a weapon. So basically a cast off pattern is when you get blood that is flung onto a surface through like a moving object. This can happen a lot with weapons, if you get weapons sort of striking into blood, and you'll get kind of a linear pattern that's across your surface. But of course this could also happen when you get someone that's got blood on their hands and they're just moving around the it doesn't have to be on their hands, by the way, but just on their person, and they're moving through the scene and the blood is flicking off them, which is leaving these cast off patterns. I think I've done some tests before and I've actually left a cast off pattern as my hand had blood on it, but I reached up to grab a door handle and I left this cast off stain on the back of the door as my hand was leading up to this door handle. So you can quite simply have a cast off pattern, but it's not necessarily through a violent act. So again, this is really, really crucial that a crime scene investigator or BPA expert will have this understanding that not everything that you see is through a violent act, just movements through a crime scene. Going back to cast off, what we would normally see is if you've got multiple blows into blood, your first blow that you make is not necessarily going to leave a cast off stain, because your victim may not be bleeding at the time. So that first blow is what's going to cause that blood to then form on that person, and then it's the second blow is when your weapon will collect that blood from that person, and then you'll start to see cast off patterns. So when you've got someone that's been struck multiple times, if you've got say 5 cast off patterns, then I know that they've been struck at least 6 times, if you see what I mean, because you've got this first blow that is then going to cause the injury to form that blood. So those are kind of like some main spatter stains that you would see. Another one is an arterial bleed or a projected pattern. Now arterial bleeds, they can look quite sinister at crime scenes because your arteries are almost like your motorways or your highways that take the most amount of blood around your body, and this is why whenever you say sever an artery or break an artery, there can be a lot of blood that is then left at a crime scene. And your arteries are under pressure from the heart, so the heart is pumping these arteries, and you may have seen this on say documentaries or something. Whenever you get an arterial bleed, it will tend to squirt out, but it will squirt, and then as the heart contracts, the blood will kind of lessen, and then the heart will pump again, and then the squirt becomes say more prominent. And then what you'll tend to find at a crime scene is you get this kind of wavy pattern where you've got the blood that has kind of ejected at full pressure from the heart, and then the heart will drop, and then full pressure, and then the heart will drop. So as I'm talking, I'm waving my finger up and down. It's helping me visualize it. So these can be quite sinister looking stains at crime scenes. Now we move on to the passive category. So passive, quite simply, the most common stain that you'll see is a drip. So a single drip that has fallen from your subject to the ground, leaving that spherical shape. It's just travelled, no force at all. It's gone downwards. Gravity has sort of induced it, pulled it to the earth, and it's there been deposited on your floor. So then what you'll tend to find is if someone is passively bleeding, they're moving through your crime scene, then you're going to have perhaps a drip trail. So a drip trail is basically a succession of drip stains that will travel throughout your crime scene, and then you'll be able to see exactly where that person has gone. You might also have what's called a drip pattern, where you get blood into blood. So blood is just dripping into blood, and that kind of tells you that your subject, whoever is passively bleeding, has stopped within a scene. Now I've done this and seen this at scenes where someone has stopped because they've gone to get their landline phone. The landline phone was cordless, so we found the cradle at this scene where the phone should be, and we found a drip pattern where they've stopped to pick up that phone, and then we followed this drip trail within the scene, and then found another drip pattern where that person has stopped, and then next to it was the phone. So you could see here that they were stopped to get the phone, to pick it up, to make the call, to try and get help. So these stains, so your drip trail, your drip pattern, will help formulate exactly kind of what this person has done whilst they were in that panic of being that victim. You'll also have other stains like pooling. So if someone is knocked unconscious and they're on the floor, or if they're unable to get up, they're sort of incapacitated in any way, it may be that they're bleeding out, and that's when they'll start to form like a big pool around them of blood. That is a passive stain, because again there's no force that is being used to produce that stain. It's just the blood is just coming out of them. What you also have in the passive category is what's called a flow pattern. So a flow pattern could quite simply be your blood has deposited on a surface, and that surface is at an angle, so the blood is going to kind of run down towards, say, gravity, towards the floor. I was at a scene where it was deemed as suspicious. The person had a bloodied nose, and I was able to help suggest why the crime wasn't suspicious, why it could have just been an accident. And one of the many factors around it, so don't think that this is the only reason why, but I analysed the blood that was coming out of their nose. They were on their back, so their face was pointing upwards towards the sky, and they had blood coming out of their nose, and it was coming out of their nose and running straight down their cheeks. So it wasn't going towards their mouth, it was coming down towards their cheeks, towards their ears, and then running towards the floor. So what could we determine from this? Well, it told me that the person's nose had started bleeding whilst they were on the floor, because if they were stood upright, then the blood would have flowed down their face towards their mouth and towards their chin. But because the blood was going down their cheeks and towards their ears, it suggested to me that actually the blood had started when they'd hit the floor. So this was one of the many reasons why this death was deemed non-suspicious. But it played a part as well, and it was another contributing factor as to what had occurred. And this is what Bloodstain Pattern Analysis will really benefit from as well, is all the other evidence factors that come out of it. It could also be, say, the post-mortem results. These may sort of help with what you're seeing at a scene. So if you know someone has suffered a particular injury, going back to like the arterial bleeds, if in your post-mortem results or your autopsy for your American listeners, you gain that knowledge that an artery has been broken, then you may then go and find it at the crime scene as to where this arterial bleed has sort of occurred. It could also be that you've got CCTV evidence of what's happened, and this can play a part in your BPA interpretation. And this is why it's so beneficial to think of all the other scenarios that could happen. So when you see your bloodstain pattern at your scene, you've got to determine what could have caused this and the many kind of factors that could have been used to cause these bloodstains, because you don't want to look like an absolute wally if you say that you're seeing an arterial bleed on a wall and your victim hasn't got like an artery that's been severed, or if you say that someone has been punched at a scene and you can see this because you've got an impact pattern, and then you watch the CCTV and person has just stepped in blood, and that's where your impact pattern has come from. So you do need, like I've said before, to have that inner argument with yourself. It's almost like that devil and angel on your shoulders. They need to have an argument with each other as to what evidence they think it is. And then a lot of time, if you don't know, then you just don't know. You can say that a stain may be under that spatter category, but you're not actually sure if it is expirated or if it's an impact pattern, because of the other factors that are playing its part. So now we're going to move on to those transfer patterns. So quite simply, the transfer patterns we're going to break down into 3 subcategories. So you've got contact, where a blood-bearing surface has come into direct contact with another surface, and there's been no movement applied when the blood touches that surface. So it could quite simply be, I've got blood on my hands, I make contact with a wall, leaving my nice fingerprints in blood. There's been no movement, so I haven't swiped my hands or anything like that. It's just almost made that that butterfly impression that if you're doing painting on a paper, you get a kind of like direct copy of one thing and another. It could be that your footwear, you leave your footwear marks behind. This would perhaps be an example of a transfer pattern if you are leaving your footwear marks in blood at a crime scene. And then I've already said the word. You have a swipe pattern. So a swipe pattern is when you leave blood behind on a surface, but there's movement in your contact. So it could be that I've got blood on my hands again. Same example, I come into contact with a wall, but this time my hand is going to move through in motion as I'm touching that wall. So say I'm in a bit of a panic, I'm in a bit of a rush, I'm trying to get up and get away, and my hands are moving across this wall. Then what you might see on the wall is these swipe patterns where you've got blood that is moving. You've got striations, so like lines of movement, and it's not completely crystal clear as to what has left that pattern. So yeah, it's really hard for me to just talk about these without actually showing you a picture. If I show you a picture, this podcast would probably be about 5 minutes long, where I'm not having to explain it as deeply. But maybe this is good. Maybe it's good for you to listen to the kind of theory behind it rather than just seeing it. And I said 3 stains, so the next stain, other than a swipe, is a wipe pattern. So a wipe pattern is where you've got blood that's already on a surface, and your hand or body part or anything moves through that pre-existing stain. Now, how do you tell these apart from a swipe pattern? They sound like they're going to be quite similar. Well, when blood strikes a surface, it's going to start the drying process. Now, there's lots of factors that could affect how quickly that blood dries. It could be, say, like temperature in a room, the airflow, the humidity. All these things play a part if it's in direct sunlight. So when it starts its drying process, the kind of thinnest parts of the blood are going to dry first. It's a bit like, if you've got a wet piece of clothing that is absolutely soaking wet, and you've got like part of the same clothing that's actually it's a bit thinner, so it's not going to retain a lot of that moisture, then those kind of thinner parts are going to dry first. And it's kind of the same with blood. So the most amount of blood is going to be in that center of the blood stain. So say if we're picturing a spherical blood stain, that immediate center is going to be kind of the thickest point. It's the circumference of that blood stain. If you were to kind of do a cross section of the blood, it would kind of look a bit like a minstrel. If you know those, I don't sell these, but if you can picture a galaxy minstrel, if you were to look at that side on, it's thick in the middle, but then thinner in the kind of circumference, and it'll be these parts of the blood that tend to dry first. So what you'll get is if you wipe through a pattern, like say a spherical blood stain like this, it's going to leave behind that outer ring that is already dried first. And this is called skeletonization. There's no test at the end of this, but I've always remembered this for some reason. I don't know quite why, but it's called skeletonization, where you've got this drying process that's already happened. You wipe through this blood stain, and it leaves this outer ring with not a lot of blood in the middle because you've wiped that away. You may even, when you're doing your cleaning, you may see this when you've got your tea and your coffee stains and stuff like this, or it might be that you've got like your bolognese sauce or something, and you wipe it away, and the middle of the stain wipes away quite nicely, but then you just have to give it a little bit extra work to the outer parts because it's already started that drying process. So check it out next time you're doing your cleaning for these kind of outer rings that left behind. But that is a wipe stain, and we've kind of covered the 3 main categories of blood stains. Now there are a lot more categories that I say haven't really touched upon. You've got things like gunshot patterns and low and high impact velocity patterns. You've also got, say, insect stains. That was a bit of a tongue twister. Insect stains, and these are stains that, say, if you've got a deceased, you'll get flies swarming around. They'll suck up blood. They like to feast on this, but they might regurgitate it at a scene. Say like I've found stains like this in the corner, like of the ceiling and the wall, really up high, and this is just where like the flies will conjugate and regurgitate their bloods, the blood that they've kind of feasted on. In a nutshell, those are the kind of patterns that you would expect to find at crime scenes, and you may be wondering, like, how do we apply this knowledge into cases and into the courtroom and the court process? What information can we then take from that crime scene, and how can we present this? So to give you an example, and this is a true example of something that I dealt with, and it's probably as simple as it gets when it comes to BPA interpretation. And I'd gone to a burglary scene. It was there was a smashed window. Someone had climbed through the window, stolen money out of this safe that they managed to break into, and then exit via the same window. I came in, I did my crime, CSI stuff, as we call it. Found blood that was on this safe, recovered that blood, sent it off, and it identified a known person that was, I think it was known for burglary, but he was also known to the victim. So he basically burgled his mate's house. I know, great mate, right? And so already this person had been in the house before, legitimately as a friend, but he had been in the house before. So his argument, when we found his blood, when it came back to him, he said, well, yeah, my blood was there because I got a nosebleed once. My nose was bleeding while I was at his house, and it must have just flicked off me and landed on this safe. And so I was presented with that as, say, like his defence as to why it was there. And I looked at this bloodstain that was on a safe, and it was what we would categorise as a transfer stain. So, quite simply, I didn't go back and say, no, the offender is completely wrong, he has got blood on him, he's on his hand, and then put it on the safe. I did not do that, because that's when you can start tripping up, basically. So what I did was I just kept it short, kept it simple, analysed the stain and did a picture of the stain in my report and said, this stain is what we classify as a transfer, it was actually a swipe stain because you had movement in it, but it was a swipe stain when you've got a bloodied object that comes into contact being the key part here, with a non-blood bearing surface where movement is applied to the blood bearing object coming into contact. And then after he got that statement, he filed a guilty plea, which, is always fantastic because it saves the whole court process then. His idea that blood had flicked off him because he got a nosebleed, it had travelled through the air and then struck this safe, that just wasn't what I was seeing at the crime scene, because like I've said, if you have blood that flicks and it becomes airborne, it forms that spherical shape until it strikes the surface, and then you might get, say, an elliptical or like an oval stain. It will also have what we call a tail, which points to the direction at which it's travelling. The tails are going to be quite hard for me to describe on this podcast, so I suggest you do a bit of research if you're interested in that. But that's what I would expect to find if his blood had travelled through the air and struck the safe, which wasn't there. So, better luck next time, mate. But, I'm going to finish now. It's been a really great podcast for me to talk about because, I'm just so passionate about this topic. It's something that is so incredibly interesting for me to visualise and to come up with different opinions and not different opinions, but different interpretations of why a blood has struck the surface and try and work out why it is this method and not another method. If you, like me, are really interested in this, then what I suggest you do is either pick up some books or go online. I'll give you a few resources here. So I've spoken about Jo Millington before. She was the one that did my training. You can catch her website. It's spattered.co.uk. So spattered, spattered.co.uk. And she's got her website there, and she does a lot of training. She'll come into, say, like universities, even professionals, say like police bodies, and do training with them. You've also got Bevel and Gardner. They've got a book out basically called Bloodstain Pattern Analysis. You can't get that wrong. And this is a guide that I refer to quite a lot in my studies. Bevel and Gardner, two Americans, they have really kind of pioneered the training in Bloodstain Pattern Analysis, and yeah, they've done some fantastic work there. Another book that I really enjoy, and she doesn't, how can I put this? Not all people kind of agree with her methods in that, but I think it's a really, really interesting read, and it's Anita Wonder, Bloodstain Pattern Evidence. It's a really good book, and it goes into quite a lot of real cases and what she's seen and how she's applied her knowledge and everything. So there's some good resources, and of course you've got the internet, which is just your oyster when it comes to education, basically. But again, thank you so much if you are listening to this point of the podcast. Thank you so much for sticking with me and listening to this. I really, really hope you've enjoyed this one. I know I have, because it's a subject that I just very close to me and I really enjoy, and I love kind of shouting at Dexter, CSI and all that when they get it completely wrong. So you will be able to do that now. Well done, you've gained this knowledge. Do reach out to me on social media. So I'm on Twitter at CSI Chris G, surname G, which is spelled G-E-E. And if you've got any questions regarding this, then do drop us a message. Thank you ever so much again, and take care and stay safe. This is crime scene investigator Chris G signing off. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed listening. Be sure to subscribe and follow my social media at CSI Chris G. Until next time, stay safe out there, and I'll see you at the next crime scene.
So this killer used a sword?
No, probably a very sharp knife. Look at the blood spatter, look at the patterns. It tells a story. You see this big pond of blood right there?
Pond of
That's
blood?
From the initial stab.
Dexter!
The male victim was
what are you on about?
right here.